Ladies and gentlemen, when we speak of love, we often speak in terms of choice. We tell ourselves, I choose this person, or I want to be with them because I desire them. But the truth I want to share with you tonight goes deeper than mere choice. Because choice alone is fleeting, it is conditional, and it is fragile. There is another layer, far beneath the surface of attraction, desire, and preference. A layer where someone is not merely a choice, but a necessity, a force woven into the very fabric of your being. When I say Tum Sirf Meri choice nahi, Meri Zaroorat Ho, I am referring to that rare, profound connection that transcends preference, transcends fleeting emotion, and anchors itself into the core of your existence. Think about the human brain for a moment. Neuroscience tells us that our emotional circuits are designed to recognize patterns, to predict and anticipate, to seek what sustains us and what nourishes our survival. In relationships, we are drawn not just to the attractive, the familiar, or the convenient. We are drawn to those whose presence aligns with our psychological and emotional equilibrium. Someone who is not merely wanted but needed triggers circuits in the brain associated with security, oxytocin release, and long-term bonding. The science of attachment shows us that when a person becomes essential to our emotional homeostasis, our brains treat their presence as non-negotiable, as vital for our well-being. This is why such people are rare, why they are irreplaceable, and why their absence can feel devastating in ways that simple choice cannot explain. I want you to imagine for a moment the subtlety of need and love. Consider a life where every decision, every thought, every aspiration includes an invisible guiding gravity, someone whose absence creates a vacuum your soul instinctively resists. Think of the way great innovators, pioneers, and leaders are sustained, not by mere companions, but by indispensable anchors who keep them grounded, who challenge them, who love them in ways that cannot be optional. I have seen it repeatedly. Those who find such anchors in their lives are capable of extraordinary emotional resilience, unprecedented focus, and a profound sense of purpose. Without that anchor, even the brightest minds, the boldest hearts falter. Real life illustrates this. Consider the stories of people who have faced unimaginable pressure. Artists, scientists, entrepreneurs, caregivers. Many reach a moment when their choice alone could not sustain them. It is not the temporary companionship or fleeting desire that carries them through exhaustion, despair, or vulnerability. It is the necessity of someone whose presence is not negotiable, whose love is a constant, and whose faith in them is unwavering. This is the difference between loving someone as a choice and needing someone as a lifeline. One can leave, the other cannot. One can be replaced, the other is irreplaceable. Emotionally, this manifests in profound ways. The neuroscience of empathy shows us that humans mirror the emotional states of those closest to them. When someone becomes essential to your being, your emotional regulation, your sense of joy, and even your capacity for resilience are intricately linked to them. Your heart doesn't just desire their love, it depends on it, it thrives in it, it organizes itself around it. Psychologists call this secure attachment, and unlike insecure attachments born of fear or avoidance, this form of connection is stabilizing, it is protective, it is not optional, it is fundamental. Now I want you to reflect on language itself. To Meri, choice is voluntary. Meri Zaroorat is essential. In life, the difference between the two is monumental. Choice can be made or unmade, delayed, postponed, or ignored. Need cannot. The presence of a person you need shifts the axis of your reality. Decisions are calibrated around them. Priorities are reordered. Time itself seems to expand to accommodate their existence. And in the absence of such a person, even the world's brightest lights, money, success, achievement, feel hollow. Because a life without essential connection, without that irreplaceable anchor, is incomplete at its foundation. Love, in this sense, is not a luxury. It is biological, psychological, and existential. Studies in social neuroscience suggest that humans who lack essential bonds show decreased resilience, heightened stress response, and diminished capacity for meaningful joy. We are wired for deep connection, and when someone is not just wanted but needed, our entire physiology, from hormonal responses to neural networks, aligns with them. Our happiness, focus, and even our ability to endure adversity become intimately tied to their presence. This is not poetic exaggeration, it is hardwired reality. I want to take you deeper into the human experience of realization. The moment you recognize that someone is not just your choice, but your necessity. Often it comes silently, almost imperceptibly. You realize it not through grand gestures, but in the small persistent patterns, the way absence creates a vacuum, the way proximity brings a calm you cannot replicate elsewhere, the way your mind and heart gravitate toward them, even when logic suggests you should be elsewhere. This realization is both humbling and empowering. Humbling, because it reminds you of your vulnerability. Empowering, because it gives clarity, focus, and the emotional drive that fuels dedication in every dimension of life. Consider the lives of those who achieve extraordinary things. Look closely and you will see that their most vital relationships are not optional or superficial. They are foundational. These are people who anchor them, who provide not just love, but essential emotional stability, whose influence cannot be measured in simple affection, but in the way they shape decisions, fortify courage, and sustain the heart when the mind is under siege. And yet, recognition alone is not enough. To truly honor someone who is your need, not just your choice, requires action, awareness, and responsibility. It demands that you nurture them, protect them, and never take their presence for granted. Neuroscience reminds us that the brain thrives on patterns, repetition, and consistency. Relationships are no different. When someone is essential, your behavior must reflect that irreplaceable value. Your choices must prioritize them, not because of obligation, but because reality itself demands it. Ladies and gentlemen, understanding this distinction between choice and need transforms the way we approach life, relationships, and personal growth. Those who see their beloved as essential act differently. They listen more deeply, invest more meaningfully, and create experiences that reinforce trust, security, and mutual growth. In essence, they architect a life around love that is not optional but foundational. And when this perspective is internalized, it changes everything. It changes how you communicate, how you love, how you forgive, and how you endure the inevitable storms of existence. It is here that love intersects with purpose. When someone is your necessity, your love for them becomes a compass. It guides decisions, influences priorities, and fuels actions that align not only with your individual life, but with shared vision, shared security, and shared joy. You realize that love is no longer just an emotion, it is a principle, a stabilizing force, a framework for your life's architecture. This principle affects not only personal growth, but also professional dedication, emotional intelligence, and your ability to cultivate resilience in the face of uncertainty. Think about moments of vulnerability. Every human being faces them. Moments when logic, pride, and ego fail, when the world feels overwhelming, when success is hollow, when fear grips the heart. It is precisely in these moments that essential love becomes undeniable. When someone is your need, their presence can soothe, recalibrate, and restore the equilibrium of mind and heart. It is a profound neuropsychological phenomenon. The presence of essential attachment figures lowers cortisol, boosts oxytocin, and strengthens both emotional regulation and resilience. Without this, we flounder. With it, we endure. With it, we thrive. And so recognizing that someone is not merely your choice but your necessity is both a gift and a responsibility. It is a call to act, to honor, to prioritize, and to create a relationship ecosystem that reflects the irreplaceable value of that person. It is not enough to feel. Action is required. Attention is required. Protection, empathy, consistency, and understanding are required. Because essential love is delicate, yet powerful, vulnerable, yet transformative. It shapes the architecture of your life in ways you cannot imagine until you live it fully. Ladies and gentlemen, let us consider the subtle ways in which this essential presence shapes the course of our lives. When someone is no longer merely a choice but a necessity, your perception of time itself transforms. Every hour, every decision, every fleeting thought is influenced by the gravity of their existence. You do not simply allocate attention to them. Your neural pathways prioritize their presence in ways that are both conscious and subconscious. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function, begins to integrate their needs into planning, problem-solving, and emotional regulation. This is not manipulation. This is evolution. The brain recognizes essential attachment as a survival imperative, as vital as air, nourishment, or rest. To be needed in someone's life is to hold a unique power and a profound responsibility, a responsibility that demands not perfection but presence. Real life demonstrates the weight of this principle repeatedly. Consider the scientist in a lab who works tirelessly to unravel the mysteries of the universe. Alone, the pursuit is cold and purely technical. But with someone who is essential, who grounds their humanity and reminds them why the world they build matters, every experiment, every failure, every breakthrough gains meaning. The same is true in relationships. Love that is essential anchors us, gives purpose to our struggles, and illuminates even the darkest corners of existence. The person we need becomes the lens through which we interpret meaning, connection, and value. I have witnessed the truth of this phenomenon in countless contexts. Entrepreneurs who push boundaries, artists who risk everything to create, individuals navigating the turbulence of life. Those who have essential people in their lives navigate challenges with a resilience that is almost scientific in its consistency. They endure longer, focus sharper, and recover faster. And the science is clear: essential attachments directly affect stress responses, emotional regulation, and even the immune system. To have someone as your necessity is not a luxury, It is a biological, psychological, and existential advantage. Yet recognizing necessity is not enough. It is a call to responsibility. To honor someone who is your essential attachment requires self-reflection, sacrifice, and consistency. You cannot treat this relationship casually or with complacency. The neural pathways that encode trust, affection, and bonding are strengthened through repetition, reliability, and emotional consistency. Love that is needed but neglected becomes a source of stress and dissonance. Love that is nurtured, however, evolves into a stabilizing force that amplifies growth, fortifies resilience, and deepens mutual understanding. This is why the language of choice is inadequate. Choice can be postponed, deferred, or ignored. Necessity cannot. Necessity demands attentiveness, care, and conscious action. Think about moments of crisis, financial strain, health emergencies, personal failures. In these moments, the people we merely choose may drift, but the essential ones anchor us. The amygdala, which governs emotional response to stress, is tempered by the presence of someone whose role is irreplaceable. Oxytocin floods the system, calming fear, reinforcing trust, and creating the mental space needed to act decisively. This is why those who are necessary are rarely replaceable. Their absence cannot simply be filled by another. They are embedded in the architecture of our being. Let us consider another layer, the psychological mirror effect. When someone is essential, their perception of us affects our self-concept, our confidence, and our capacity for risk. Their trust becomes a foundation upon which we build courage. Their patience becomes a stabilizer for our impulses. Their love, consistent and necessary, becomes a neural scaffold that strengthens executive function, emotional regulation, and the capacity to endure adversity. In short, essential love does not simply comfort. It transforms. It aligns the mind, heart, and purpose into a coherent, functioning whole. Now imagine the impact of acknowledging this necessity consciously. Recognizing someone as essential allows us to prioritize their needs intuitively, to align our behavior with their emotional and psychological well-being, and to cultivate an environment of trust, intimacy, and mutual growth. The behavioral patterns that emerge are not arbitrary, they are supported by neurobiology. Mirror neurons fire in response to their state, empathy circuits activate more intensely, and the brain's reward centers are engaged not by superficial stimuli, but by the reinforcement of essential connection. The act of nurturing someone who is your necessity becomes intrinsically rewarding, creating a feedback loop that strengthens both individuals simultaneously. And yet the most profound lessons emerge not in calm but in turbulence. When external pressures mount, societal expectations, professional challenges, personal setbacks, the essential person remains the stabilizing anchor. Decisions are no longer impulsive or self-centered, they are calibrated through the lens of mutual necessity. Emotional intelligence, patience, and resilience are not just virtues, they are survival mechanisms. And through this lens, love is no longer romanticized as fleeting passion, it is recognized as an essential cognitive and emotional ecosystem that sustains life, purpose, and meaning. Ladies and gentlemen, the implications extend beyond the individual. When we anchor our lives around those we truly need, we create ripples of stability and productivity that affect communities, workplaces, and societies. Relationships grounded in necessity and nurtured with awareness foster collaboration, reduce conflict, and enhance collective resilience. Neuroscience, psychology, and sociology converge on this truth. When essential bonds are strong, individual and group functioning elevates. When neglected, even the most capable individuals falter. This understanding should fundamentally change the way we approach love, partnership, and commitment. To love someone as a necessity is to elevate them in the hierarchy of priorities, not through coercion or obligation, but through recognition of their irreplaceable role in our emotional architecture. It is to act with intentionality, to communicate consistently, to invest time and energy in ways that reinforce their value. It is to align our lives with theirs not because we must, but because our mental, emotional, and existential stability depends upon it. And so acknowledging that someone is more than a choice, acknowledging that they are a necessity, changes everything. Our decision-making, our emotional resilience, our capacity for empathy, our personal growth, and our life's trajectory. It teaches us humility, responsibility, and the profound power of interdependence. It reminds us that love is not mere sentiment, but a structural principle guiding our existence, shaping our neural pathways, and determining our capacity for joy, focus, and purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, understanding that someone is a necessity also brings with it the weight of reflection. We must examine our own behaviors, motivations, and emotional patterns. It is easy to take for granted the presence of those we cannot imagine living without. But neuroscience reminds us that neglect, even unintentional, has measurable consequences. The brain responds to inconsistency and emotional neglect with stress, elevated cortisol, and diminished neuroplasticity. This is why relationships that are essential require more than passive presence. They require active, intentional engagement. To truly honor someone who is your necessity, one must practice consistent communication, empathy, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Consider real-world examples of partnerships that thrive under this principle. In professional collaborations, the most effective teams often function because each member is indispensable in a complementary way. But in personal life, the stakes are higher: emotional, cognitive, and existential. Those who understand that their partner is essential do not measure love in words alone. They measure it in actions, decisions, and sacrifice. When the necessary person feels secure, valued, and prioritized, the relationship functions as a stabilizing ecosystem, capable of weathering uncertainty, disappointment, and change. Emotional intelligence plays a pivotal role here. Recognizing necessity demands that we tune into micro-expressions, subtle shifts in tone, and unspoken needs. Mirror neurons fire not in isolation, but in complex interaction with the other's emotional state, creating a biological feedback system that reinforces connection. This is why essential relationships feel almost telepathic at times. The brain has literally been trained to anticipate and respond to the other, creating harmony at a neurobiological level. It is a reminder that love is not just a feeling, it is a dynamic, evolving system of attention, care, and mutual influence. We cannot ignore the ethical dimension of necessity. When we identify someone as essential, we are morally obligated to safeguard their well-being, just as much as we are rewarded psychologically by their presence. It is a commitment not bound by circumstance, but by recognition of the central role they play in our lives. This principle scales: parents, siblings, partners, mentors, friends. Those whose absence would create a void cannot be treated as optional. Their needs, safety, and dignity become integral to our decision-making processes. The act of honoring necessity is simultaneously a moral, emotional, and biological imperative. It is important to recognize the difference between attachment and necessity. Attachment can be transient, sometimes dependent on convenience or immediate gratification. Necessity, however, is structural. It shapes cognition, behavior, and emotional health. In neuropsychology, this is reflected in the way long-term attachments modulate the limbic system, influencing fear responses, stress regulation, and reward pathways. To love someone as a necessity is to weave their presence into the very architecture of your brain, creating resilience, motivation, and focus in ways that superficial connections cannot. History and literature are full of examples of individuals whose recognition of essential people changed their trajectory. Innovators, leaders, artists, and philosophers who understood the irreplaceable nature of certain relationships often cite these bonds as sources of inspiration, grounding, and motivation. Conversely, neglecting the essential has historically led to emotional fragmentation, poor decision-making, and regret that echoes across lifetimes. Science confirms this. The loss of an essential attachment triggers more intense stress responses than almost any other event, reinforcing the profound value of these relationships. In practical terms, how do we act on this awareness? First, through mindfulness, a conscious effort to appreciate presence, to notice the subtle ways in which the other enhances our life. Second, through reciprocity, acknowledging their needs, offering support without expectation, and investing time and energy consistently. Third, through communication, sharing vulnerability, expressing trust, and cultivating a shared narrative that reinforces significance. These actions, while seemingly simple, have profound neurobiological and emotional impacts, strengthening synaptic connections that support empathy, reward, and emotional regulation. The implications extend beyond personal life. Communities and societies are structured on the recognition of essential relationships. Stability, cooperation, and trust in groups often emerge from the same principles, recognizing indispensable contributions, prioritizing essential roles, and acting with consistent attention and care. When we honor those we cannot live without, we do not just enhance our own lives, we create systems of support, resilience, and ethical accountability that ripple outward. Ladies and gentlemen, the final insight is this: acknowledging necessity transforms the way we measure love and commitment. No longer is it sufficient to simply feel affection or admiration. The truly essential bond demands action, courage, and reflection. It calls on us to integrate the other into the very logic of our existence, shaping decisions, priorities, and behavior in ways that are deliberate and sustaining. The person we need is not a temporary indulgence. They are a central variable in the equation of our life, and treating them as anything less than essential undermines both our stability and their well-being. And so we arrive at the profound conclusion that love, when recognized as necessity, is neither fleeting nor superficial. It is a principle that governs our brain, our emotions, our ethics, and our future. To recognize this is to commit to presence, attentiveness, and integrity. It is to act not out of convenience, but out of recognition of the irreplaceable value of another human being in our life. And when we do this, when we truly honor those who are essential, we unlock the capacity for resilience, purpose, and joy that is unparalleled. The measure of life is not the accumulation of achievements or accolades. It is the depth of connection, the reliability of presence, and the unwavering commitment to those we cannot live without. In recognizing the necessity of another, we recognize the highest potential of ourselves, the ability to love, protect, and nurture in ways that shape not just individual lives, but the fabric of society itself. And so let us carry this understanding into every decision, every interaction, and every relationship. Let us honor those who are essential, act with integrity, and recognize that to be needed and to need is one of the most profound privileges and responsibilities of our existence. Ladies and gentlemen, let's dive deeper into the practical application of this principle, because recognition alone is not enough. Action is what solidifies necessity into reality. When someone occupies a central role in your life, your behaviors must align with the acknowledgement of their irreplaceable presence. Neuroscience tells us that consistency in positive interactions strengthens trust circuits in the brain, particularly within the prefrontal cortex and amygdala, reinforcing safety, attachment, and mutual predictability. What this means in human terms is simple yet profound. Your words, gestures, and choices must constantly signal that this person matters, that they are a priority, and that their well-being is inseparable from your own. Consider moments in life when urgency and crisis strike. It is often in these moments that the essential relationships reveal their true importance. Those we cannot live without become our anchors, our compass, and our motivation to act with courage and resilience. History and lived experience demonstrate repeatedly that the people who remain present through adversity are not just companions, they are catalysts for growth, resilience, and meaning. By treating someone as essential, you are literally creating a support system that amplifies your ability to navigate challenges and uncertainties. It is equally important to understand that necessity is reciprocal. While one person may feel indispensable, the relationship thrives when both parties recognize and honor each other's centrality. This reciprocity is not merely emotional, it is a biological imperative. Oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin pathways are all modulated by positive reinforcement and mutual acknowledgement. In practice, this means that honoring someone as necessary requires active listening, validation of their experiences, and a willingness to integrate their perspectives into your decisions. Love and necessity are not static, they are dynamic, evolving processes that require continuous intentional cultivation. We also need to consider the shadow side of neglecting necessity. Ignoring or undervaluing someone whose presence is critical can lead to cascading effects, erosion of trust, heightened stress, and even long-term neurochemical changes that affect emotional regulation. The pain of being treated as optional when one is essential is profound, tapping into deep evolutionary mechanisms that prioritize social bonds for survival. Conversely, honoring necessity fosters neural resilience, emotional stability, and a profound sense of safety that allows both individuals to flourish. The principle of necessity extends beyond romantic or familial contexts. Mentorships, professional partnerships, and friendships also demonstrate this pattern. In every domain, the people who are central to our growth and well-being deserve intentional engagement. They are the ones whose absence would create a vacuum, whose contributions shape outcomes, and whose presence reinforces motivation and focus. In this way, recognizing and honoring necessity becomes a universal strategy for human flourishing, applicable to personal, social, and professional spheres. Finally, let us reflect on the ethical and philosophical dimensions. To recognize someone as essential is to acknowledge the moral gravity of your influence in their life. Every choice, every action, every lapse in attention carries weight. We are custodians not only of our own experience but also of those whose lives intersect deeply with ours. Living with this awareness transforms mundane interactions into acts of significance, where the ordinary becomes infused with meaning, responsibility, and intentionality. The practical takeaway is clear. If you truly value someone as necessary, you act consistently, you prioritize their well-being, and you integrate their presence into the very fabric of your decision-making. You do not reserve their importance for moments of convenience. You embody it daily, through action, empathy, and attentive care. Necessity, when honored, generates a feedback loop of trust, resilience, and profound relational satisfaction that cannot be replicated through superficial affection or temporary engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, let us commit to this understanding. Let us recognize who is essential in our lives, act intentionally to honor them, and cultivate bonds that are not only emotionally rich, but neurologically and ethically reinforcing. To be needed, and to honor that need is to participate fully in the highest potential of human connection. It is a principle that transforms not only relationships, but the very structure of our lives, creating a legacy of care, integrity, and meaningful presence. In the end, the most profound measure of love in life is the intentional recognition of necessity, expressed through consistent action, unwavering attention, and ethical commitment. By living with this principle, we create relationships that are resilient, fulfilling, and capable of sustaining us through every uncertainty, every challenge, and every triumph. This is the blueprint for human connection, at its deepest, most meaningful level, a recognition that to love, to need, and to honor those we cannot live without is both our privilege and our responsibility.